Genesis 12 is the start of a new journey, a new beginning, and a promise. Imagine for a moment a man named Abram. Picture him under the vast open skies of a land he's called home his entire life, familiar with every hill and valley. Abram is 75 years old, a man of wisdom and experience, rooted in his land and surrounded by his kin. Then one day he hears a voice that speaks with authority and kindness, a voice like no other. This is the voice of the Lord. The Lord calls Abram by name and gives him an instruction so bold, so grand, it changes everything. Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. Can you imagine the weight of those words? Imagine being asked to leave behind everything you know, the faces and places that shaped you, to venture into the unknown. Yet there's a promise wrapped in the call. The Lord says, I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Not only will Abram find a new land, but he is to be the father of something much greater, a nation that will carry the Lord's blessing. Now, picture Abram preparing to leave. He gathers his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their belongings, servants, animals, and supplies. Can you hear the bleating of sheep, the lowing of cattle, the sound of hooves on dry earth as they begin their journey? Imagine the questions, the uncertainty. Yet Abram goes, filled with faith in the Lord's promise, a promise that is still invisible but powerful enough to move him forward. Their journey takes them to the land of Canaan. Picture the rolling hills, the fertile plains, and the sprawling landscape Abram sees for the first time. And as he stands there, the Lord appears to him and makes a remarkable promise. Unto thy seed will I give this land. Can you feel the awe Abram must have felt seeing this land with new eyes, knowing it was destined to be a place of belonging for his descendants? In this new land, Abram builds an altar. Picture him gathering stones, stacking them carefully, each stone a symbol of his faith, his obedience, his trust in the Lord's promise. He calls upon the name of the Lord there, dedicating this place to the God who has led him to this foreign soil. And then he journeys onward, traveling southward to Bethel, where he builds yet another altar, marking each step of his journey with worship. But the story doesn't stay tranquil. A famine strikes the land, a harsh, unforgiving drought. Imagine the parched earth, the cracked soil, the desperation of the people and animals alike as they search for food and water. Driven by this need, Abram heads to Egypt, a land of plenty compared to the barren Canaan. In Egypt, the story takes an unexpected turn. Abram, fearing for his life because of Sarai's beauty, tells her to say she is his sister. He fears the Egyptians might kill him to take Sarai if they knew she was his wife. Picture the tension, the worry etched in Abram's face. Sarai's beauty captivates the Egyptians, and soon she is taken into Pharaoh's house. Yet, despite Abram's fear-driven decision, the Lord watches over him. The Lord brings plagues upon Pharaoh's household because of Sarai, a divine intervention that protects Abram and Sarai in a foreign land. Finally, Pharaoh, realizing the truth, confronts Abram. Imagine the relief mixed with shame Abram might have felt as he and Sarai are sent away, escorted out of Egypt with all they possess. Abram returns to Canaan, a man whose faith is deepened, a man whose journey has only just begun. This is the beginning of a remarkable story, where Abram's steps are guided by promises, by faith, and by the invisible yet powerful hand of God. In Genesis 13, the journey of Abram continues, unfolding with the quiet power of new decisions and landscapes rich with meaning. Imagine Abram, fresh from his departure from Egypt, journeying with Sarai and Lot back to the place where he once stood, with a heart full of hope and a soul full of faith. The air is thick with dust as they travel, leading a vast gathering of livestock, herds, and servants. The bounty they have gained, cattle, silver, and gold, glimmers in the sunlight as they make their way back to the land of Canaan, the land promised by the Lord. Picture them arriving in the area between Bethel and Ai, the place where Abram had built an altar before, the very spot where he first called upon the name of the Lord. Can you feel the weight of memory in Abram's heart? There's something deeply personal and sacred about returning to a place of worship, of recommitment. Abram stands there, likely looking up at the sky and feeling the same awe and trust he felt before, as he calls once again on the name of the Lord. It's a moment of renewal, a grounding of faith in the midst of abundance. But abundance can also bring challenges, and soon a tension arises. Lot, Abram's nephew, also has flocks, herds, and tents, and as their wealth grows, so does the land's inability to support them all. Picture the vast grassy plains beginning to wear thin under the hooves of their animals. The servants of Abram and Lot start quarreling, their voices raised, echoing through the camp. The shared land becomes a battleground of needs, a growing tension between family members. Sensing the brewing strife, Abram takes a step toward peace. Imagine him approaching Lot, perhaps putting a gentle hand on his shoulder, his voice calm and steady. He says, "Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren." Abram knows that family and unity matter more than wealth or land, and so he offers a gracious solution. "Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left." Imagine the generosity in Abram's words. He doesn't seek to claim the best land for himself, though he could have. Instead, he offers Lot the first choice. Lot looks out over the land and sees the lush Jordan Valley, rich and fertile, like the garden of the Lord. Picture the gleaming, flowing waters of the Jordan River, the fertile plains brimming with life, a land that seems to promise prosperity. Lot chooses the valley and settles near the city of Sodom, a place whose beauty hides a darker reputation. With Lot moving eastward, Abram remains in Canaan. Imagine him standing in the quietness after Lot's departure, surveying the land left to him. Then, once again, the Lord speaks to Abram. The words are filled with reassurance, with promise, expanding Abram's vision beyond anything he could have imagined. "Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever." Imagine the sweep of Abram's gaze. The mountains, valleys, and rivers stretching out in all directions. The Lord's promise is not just about land, it's about legacy. "And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that, if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered." Picture that. Innumerable descendants, as countless as the dust beneath Abram's feet, a promise rooted in faith and trust. Abram, filled with gratitude and awe, moves his tent to the plains of Mamre near Hebron, a place of strength and shade, surrounded by oak trees. And there, once again, he builds an altar to the Lord. This altar, like those before it, stands as a testament to Abram's unwavering faith. It is a place of worship, a place of dedication, a quiet yet powerful symbol of Abram's journey with God. The chapter closes with Abram in the land, at peace, trusting in the promise, and surrounded by the land that the Lord has given to him. Abram's journey is still unfolding, a story painted with promises, patience, and the beauty of an unknown future that rests in the hands of the Lord. In Genesis 14, the journey of Abram takes a dramatic turn as he faces his first conflict in the land of promise. Picture the land of Canaan and beyond, teeming with city-states, each with its own king, ruler, and ambitions. It is a time of alliances and rivalries, with kingdoms constantly shifting in power. Suddenly, a great war breaks out, involving 9 kings, 4 kings from the east against 5 kings from the region where Lot has settled, including the infamous city of Sodom. Imagine the rumble of chariots, the clashing of swords, the echo of battle cries as these kings wage war in the valley of Siddim, a valley filled with bitumen pits, sticky, treacherous ground, where one misstep could mean disaster. The armies fight fiercely, but the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah are defeated. Their people scatter, fleeing in fear, and in the chaos, the victors take prisoners and loot the cities, claiming all they can carry. Among the captives is Lot, Abram's nephew, along with his family and possessions. Now imagine a lone survivor racing across the land, breathless and desperate, finding his way to Abram to deliver the grim news. Abram listens, his heart pounding as he hears that his nephew has been captured and taken away by these foreign kings. Despite the distance, despite the risk, Abram doesn't hesitate. He gathers his men, just 318 of his trained servants. Think of the courage in this small band. Servants and herdsmen suddenly turned warriors, setting out against an army that has just conquered 5 kings. Night falls, and in the cover of darkness, Abram devises a plan. Picture the stealth, the quiet movements, as Abram divides his men, moving under the stars, tracking the unsuspecting enemy. Then, at just the right moment, they strike. Abram's men pour into the camp with precision, overwhelming the surprised soldiers. It is a victory born of courage, strategy, and a deep resolve. Abram drives the enemy all the way north to Hobah, near Damascus, a great distance from where the battle began. Now, picture the return journey. Abram comes back not as a mere wanderer, but as a victorious leader, with Lot and all his possessions, as well as other captives and their belongings. His people are safe once more, and Abram's reputation grows, known now as a man not only of faith, but of action and bravery. As Abram returns, he is met by 2 kings. First comes the king of Sodom, likely weary and grateful, but with little to offer. Then another king arrives, a mysterious figure named Melchizedek, king of Salem. Melchizedek is not only a king, but also a priest of the Most High God. Imagine him, robed in dignity, approaching Abram with bread and wine, a gesture of peace, honor, and blessing. He speaks a blessing over Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand." This blessing is rich with meaning. Melchizedek recognizes the true source of Abram's victory, the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth, who has delivered Abram's enemies into his hand. And in an act of humility and gratitude, Abram gives Melchizedek a tithe, a tenth of all the spoils, acknowledging the divine blessing in his life and the hand of God in his victory. The king of Sodom then speaks, offering Abram all the goods he recovered if he will only return the people. But Abram, with unwavering resolve, replies, "I have lift up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich." Abram doesn't want anyone to claim that his wealth or success comes from anything or anyone but the Lord. And so, with this powerful declaration, Abram returns to his camp, enriched not by the spoils of war, but by a renewed sense of purpose, faith, and blessing. He has proven himself a protector of his family, a man of honor, and a servant of the Most High God. This victory, however, is only the beginning. Abram's journey with the Lord is far from over, and each step takes him closer to a destiny that will shape not only his life, but the future of nations. In Genesis 15, Abram's journey takes a deeply personal turn, shifting from the outward struggles of war and alliances to an intimate encounter with God. Imagine Abram under a vast night sky, surrounded by the quiet stillness of the land. Despite his recent victory, there remains an ache in his heart, a question he carries in the silence. Will the Lord truly fulfill his promises? Abram has no heir, and without a son, he wonders how God's promise of a great nation will come to pass. Then, in the stillness, the Lord speaks, breaking the quiet with words of comfort. Fear not, Abram. I am thy shield, and thy exceeding great reward. Can you feel the reassurance in those words? God promises Abram protection and blessings beyond measure, but Abram, with honesty and humility, shares his concern. He asks, Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless? To Abram, it seems that Eliezer, his servant, will be his heir, since he has no son to carry on his legacy. Abram's heart is open before God, his vulnerability clear as he expresses his deepest longing. The Lord, hearing Abram's concerns, speaks again with powerful reassurance. This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. Then God leads Abram outside. Imagine the two of them standing there together under a canopy of stars, countless lights shimmering in the darkness. God tells Abram, Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. So shall thy seed be. Abram lifts his gaze, and perhaps for a moment he's overwhelmed by the sheer vastness of the promise. The stars are too many to count, each one a symbol of the future generations that will come from him. And there, beneath the stars, Abram believes. He believes in the Lord's promise, trusting in the unseen with a faith that touches the heart of God. And God, in response, counted it to him for righteousness. Abram's faith becomes a cornerstone, a foundation on which the promises of God will be built. The Lord then reminds Abram of the journey they've taken together. I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit it. Abram, still curious, still human, asks, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? God doesn't rebuke Abram's question. Instead, he invites Abram into a covenant, a sacred agreement that will seal the promise with profound symbolism. God instructs Abram to prepare a unique offering. Picture Abram gathering a heifer, a goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon, each animal laid out as directed by the Lord. As Abram waits, a deep darkness falls, and he falls into a deep sleep. In this profound stillness, a horror of great darkness comes upon him. In this moment, the Lord speaks, revealing to Abram the future of his descendants. They will be strangers in a foreign land, oppressed and enslaved for 400 years. But God promises that he will judge their oppressors, and Abram's descendants will leave that land with great wealth. And Abram himself will live a long life, passing peacefully and be buried in a good old age. As night falls fully, an extraordinary sight appears. Imagine a smoking furnace and a burning lamp passing between the pieces of Abram's offering, symbols of God's presence and commitment. This isn't just any ritual. This is God himself making a covenant. The Lord declares, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. This is the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaim, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites, a vast territory promised to Abram's descendants, a land of promise and hope. This covenant, sealed in the darkness and solitude of the night, binds Abram and God in a sacred relationship. Abram walks away, not just with promises, but with a covenant, a guarantee from God himself. It's a moment where faith and future collide, setting the stage for generations yet to come, bound by a promise as countless as the stars. Abram's journey continues, his heart full of awe, carrying the certainty of a promise that reaches beyond him, echoing through the ages. In Genesis 16, The journey of Abram and Sarai takes a turn into territory marked by impatience, human decision, and unexpected consequences. Imagine Abram and Sarai living together in the land of Canaan, day after day, year after year. The Lord had promised Abram descendants as numerous as the stars. Yet time has passed, and still Sarai has not borne a child. Picture Sarai wrestling with the weight of this unfulfilled promise, her longing for motherhood mingling with doubt, frustration, and even a sense of failure. In this restless waiting, Sarai begins to form a plan. She turns to Abram and suggests a course of action that would change everything. "Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her." Sarai offers her Egyptian servant Hagar to Abram, hoping that through Hagar she might finally see a child in her household. Imagine the tension in this moment, the hope mixed with desperation. Abram, trusting Sarai's suggestion, agrees. Hagar becomes pregnant, and as her body begins to show the signs of new life, a shift happens. Imagine Hagar's perspective. The servant suddenly elevated to bear Abram's child, the future seemingly shifting in her favor. She looks upon Sarai, her mistress, with a new sense of superiority. Sarai, seeing this change in Hagar, feels the sting of jealousy and hurt. The very plan she created now turns against her, creating tension between mistress and servant. In frustration, Sarai speaks to Abram. "My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes." Abram, caught between his wife and Hagar, tells Sarai, "Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee." Sarai, driven by wounded pride and frustration, deals harshly with Hagar, treating her with such severity that Hagar, frightened and distressed, flees into the wilderness. Imagine her there, alone and vulnerable, carrying Abram's child, but separated from the protection and provision of his household. In the wilderness, an extraordinary encounter occurs. The angel of the Lord finds Hagar by a spring of water on the way to Shur. Picture the silence of the desert, broken only by the soft sound of flowing water as Hagar encounters this divine messenger. The angel speaks gently to her. "Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou, and whither wilt thou go?" Hagar replies with honesty and sorrow, "I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai." Then the angel of the Lord gives her words of hope and direction. "Return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands." It's a challenging command, but one that comes with a promise. The angel continues, "I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude." Imagine Hagar's surprise. She is a servant, yet God sees her, and her descendants will be countless. Her child is part of a story that extends beyond her suffering. The angel then tells Hagar about the child she is carrying. "Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction." Ishmael, meaning God hears, is a name that will forever remind her that she was not abandoned, that God saw and heard her in her time of need. But the angel also gives insight into Ishmael's future, saying, "He will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." Ishmael's life will not be without struggle, yet he will carve out a place for himself and his descendants. Overwhelmed, Hagar names the place Bir Lahai Roi, meaning well of the living one who sees me. Imagine her realization. She has been seen by the Lord himself, even in her lowly state, even in her time of flight and fear. Genesis 17 reveals a pivotal moment in Abram's life, a divine encounter that marks a new chapter and deepens the promise. Imagine Abram, now 99 years old, seasoned by life, and still faithfully walking in the land God promised him, yet still waiting for the fullness of God's covenant. Then the Lord appears to him with a profound declaration. "I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect." God introduces himself as El Shaddai, the Almighty, the one with boundless power. Can you picture Abram, standing in reverence, hearing the weight of these words? The Lord speaks of a covenant, but not just any covenant, one that will seal Abram's future and establish his descendants as a people set apart. The Almighty promises, "I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly." Abram, overwhelmed by this, falls on his face in awe and humility, a gesture of complete surrender before the Lord. Then, God expands on his promise, sharing details that Abram had never heard before. "As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations." The promise now extends beyond mere descendants. It reaches into the future, forming entire nations. And with this, God changes Abram's name. "Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee." From Abram, meaning exalted father, he becomes Abraham, meaning father of many. It's a name that reflects not only his destiny, but also the vastness of God's plan. God's promises continue to unfold as he describes the covenant that will last for generations. "And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee." Picture the awe Abraham must feel as he realizes that this relationship, this divine promise, will carry on through his children, his grandchildren, and all who come after them. The land of Canaan, the land in which he dwells as a foreigner, will be given to his descendants as an everlasting possession, and God himself will be their God. Then, God introduces the sign of this covenant: circumcision. He instructs Abraham to circumcise every male in his household, a physical mark that sets them apart, a sign of their unique relationship with the Almighty. It's a command that requires obedience, trust, and commitment, binding Abraham's family to God's promise in a tangible, lifelong way. But God's words do not end here. He turns to Sarai, Abraham's wife, with a promise equally profound. God says, "As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her." Sarai, whose name becomes Sarah, meaning princess, is promised a role as mother of nations. And through her, kings will arise. Abraham, now hearing that he and Sarah will bear a child in their old age, laughs. Imagine him, nearly 100 years old, and Sarah, 90. Such a thought seems impossible. He even wonders aloud, "Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear?" In this moment, he suggests that Ishmael, his son with Hagar, might fulfill God's promise instead. But God's response is clear and firm. "Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac." Isaac, meaning he laughs, will be the son of the covenant, the child through whom God's promises to Abraham will come to life. God then reassures Abraham that Ishmael will also be blessed. "As for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly." Ishmael will be the father of 12 princes, and God will make of him a great nation. Yet the covenant, the special promise, will be with Isaac, the son who will be born to Sarah by this time next year. Abraham, obedient and faithful, takes this command to heart. He gathers his household, every male, including himself, and fulfills the covenant of circumcision that very day. Imagine the unity, the solemnity as they undergo this ritual together, marked physically as God's chosen people, committed to the covenant with El Shaddai. Genesis 17 ends with Abraham fully embraced by God's promises, now a man named Father of Many, bound to God's covenant, awaiting the miraculous birth of Isaac. This moment of faith, obedience, and divine promise reshapes Abraham's life and marks a new beginning. The journey is no longer just his own. It stretches forward through generations, linking him and his descendants to the Almighty in a covenant that will never be broken.